It's 1 minute after 10 o'clock, and it's time for Money Matters with Dr. Terrance Martin. Doc,
Hey, good morning, Jamster. How are
and
you?
I'm great, and I think you'll be pleased to know that your guest is already here, Zara Jacobs.
That's fantastic.
Morning, Zara.
And good morning, Zara. How are you?
Good morning, Jamster. Good morning, Dr. Merton.
You could call me Terrance, Zara. All right. Well, before we get started on today's show, Jamster, how was your weekend? I went to my first NFL
Oh,
game.
well, I had another episode of the Akasha Wars, I call it, in my backyard. Every few months I have to go buck wild on the acacia trees in the backyard. So I call it the Akasha Wars. Yes, yes.
Well,
And the guinea grass, but the acacia wall sounds better than guinea grass walls, So
definitely. A cousin of mine visited me from St. Kitts, so we took in his and mine's first NFL game, which was exciting. And what it really taught me, there was a money lesson even in buying tickets to an NFL game, right? This yesterday they played the Colts. Carolina Panthers played the Colts. Ticket prices, for example, in the nosebleeds were $25, right? Plus fees. But next week, when they play the Cowboys, ticket prices went to $200, right? So that was even a money lesson. And if you want the experience, take the experience, but know that you'll pay more for a brand, right? The brand that is the Dallas Cowboys. So that was an interesting thing that happened this weekend. And
I
before
see where you're going with this, but go ahead, and you're on the right track. Nice segue though. Go ahead.
And this week's topic is the emotional side of money, right? So if somebody really wanted to discuss that, and we're gonna get back to that, so it's a good intro. But really, before we get started, it's just some regional business news. Bahamas is reporting that their tourist arrivals are back to pre-pandemic stages. That came out yesterday. The Ministry of Tourism is excited about that they're back to levels of tourists and engagement that they saw since 2019. And I know in St. Kitts, we just had the inaugural landing of JetBlue. There's a lot of conversation about what's that going to mean for competition coming out of the New York market. What's that going to mean for pricing? And that's a conversation I would love to be a part of if we could get some tourism officials, because my take is that it really won't do much in terms of pricing after the introductory period and pricing has fallen. And it's not going to do that much in terms of breaking that monopoly that we've observed and seen with American Airlines. CIBC, first Caribbean to sell its banking assets in the Dutch territories of St. Martin and Curacao. And I think at one point, our indigenous bank, National Bank, was trying to acquire them. I'm not sure if that's the case still or if they went through or they stopped
Well,
that process.
I can fill you in on that. The central bank didn't approve it
Ooh,
for whatever reason.
interesting. I wonder if they would tell us more. But they're also rebranding. They're dropping the first Caribbean and rebranding just to CIBC, which is interesting in and of itself. It's really not a major change, but they see it as necessary. WINNMedia adds a second ATR, so hopefully in terms of our localized market, that will actually mean more increased travel. Although I did see a couple of people talking about it would cost like $600 to go to St. Martin from St. Kitts, which is just crazy to me to think that's the case. Let's see what else is going on in the region. There's a local company in Guyana that was identified to be a part of the oil explorations. That's a big deal there for that company. That's going to create necessary jobs. And they also, a couple of weeks ago, discovered even more oil in that area. So that's a major move for Guyana. Something that was really interesting, the Bank of Jamaica temporarily suspends acceptance of the TNT currency. I was like, wow, I don't understand that. That would be something to dig in more. That happened on the weekend. That announcement came on this weekend. So we have some interesting things happening in the region. I know at home in St. Kitts, we're still waiting to hear, unless they've announced since, whether or not we will have duty free and when that would actually start. But that's just some of the regional news items that we have. The wars continue in the world and the impact that they have on us will remain. But we did see some positive movements in the stock market. in the United States and around the globe, so which would be really good for investors and any of our institutions that have investments in the US and Europe. All right. So that's the morning news. And let's talk about the show today. I'm so excited about this show. And let me first start by introducing the topic, then I'll turn the mic over to Ms. Jacobs and she will introduce herself. So this is another episode of Money Matters, as you know. St. Kitts, even with our vibrant culture and our rich history that has shaped our core beliefs and values, and especially it's also shaped our relationship with money, right? A lot of our family upbringing and socialization at home and in the community, such as church and schools, etc., has really shaped our views and relationship with money. Now, money, as we know, isn't just a medium of exchange, but it could also be a symbol of many emotions, from security and pride to fear and sometimes even shame. Now, today we venture in beyond the numbers and dive deep into the behavioral aspect of money, the emotions and the psychology behind our financial habits and decisions. Now, I am truly honored to introduce this special guest for today's show, a psychologist, a seasoned psychologist, Miss Zara Jacobs, who has dedicated her life to understanding the nexus between our minds and our behavior. Now, together, we'll explore the intricate dance between the Kittitian and Nevisian spirit, and by extension, the Caribbean spirit and the emotional side of money. So, whether you found yourself impulsively buying something to lift your mood or hesitating to talk about money because of the deep-seated beliefs that we were instilled from our childhood, today's show promises insights that might just spark financial epiphanies. You know, I always end my shows by saying it takes financial knowledge to know you're making a financial mistake. But sometimes even with that knowledge, we don't act. So hopefully we're able to start some well-needed conversation with this topic. Good morning, Ms. Jacobs. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Good morning,
Kindly
Dr.
introduce yourself.
Martin. My name is Zara Jacobs. I'm the president of the St. Kitts Mental Health Association. I have been back home, I guess, about a decade doing work in mental health, helping people. My little thing is, strengthen roots for growth. Like some of us are just not anchored well enough in order to do the things that we would like to do. So I do help people delve a little deeper. I cannot promise that there will be major epiphanies, but hopefully, I think finance people sell hard. Mental health people sell a little softer. So hopefully we'll be able to help people identify a few things that might be holding them back and hopefully a few things that will help them move forward.
Awesome. You know, I think broadly though, and thank you again for agreeing to be on the show so willingly as well, and then working as we had to do some time changes. You know, we grew up in a society where money is still largely taboo, right? And we want to unpack some of this reluctance to discuss money in our culture. Where do you think some of that stem from, Zara?
Well, a big part of it, I think, has to just do with the size of our communities, because it is almost obvious how people are doing. We see so many aspects of people's lives, right? We don't just see whether or not they catch bus, what type of vehicle they drive, and all of us have a sense of what things cost. When we're posting, we see where people are going out for dinner. We have a sense of what the hair costs, what the nails cost. So we're doing like a mental math. Some of us even have a sense of how much people make. So the comparison factor in St. Kitts is just a lot higher than it might be in other places.
So is it a situation where we don't even have to discuss it because we could calculate it,
Well, we
right?
assume we can calculate it.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is very true.
Because, I mean,
That's
even I do. I look around at some people and I just don't understand how they seem to have what they have. The math doesn't math. So maybe you can make it math. But, I think people are confused and they do a lot of comparisons all the time because we are so small. We went to primary school with people. We have a sense of what they're doing and we're just like, but how? I think there are just a lot of questions. But one of the things that I think is pretty, and I'm sure this is the true of like many other people of the diaspora, we are fairly new to money. as a
Mm-hmm.
people. Like,
That's true.
we're like, many of us are like 3 generations away from our like grandparents or great grandparents earning an income that needed to support their lives. Due to
Mm-hmm.
like enslavement, many of us don't have just generations of making money and making it work.
And
Like,
wealth, exactly. We
well,
don't have that wealth transfer as well.
yeah, so we're like 3 generations off from
Mm-hmm.
possibly wealth, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't even have that experience, that generational knowledge of how to manage money. We were sort of living on estates, kind of depending
Mm-hmm.
on like the shops to barter and move everything. If we go back, very few of us have a great grandparent who earned a salary that had to support a family by itself. We were doing other things to kind of support our family. So, 2 generations later, it's not surprising that we're kind of struggling with that piece.
With that piece. And that's really insightful. The cultural underpinnings, the historical impact. Some people say, for example, let's stop talking about slavery. Let's stop talking about that time in our past and just move forward. But really, we see the impact of it still today in a lot of the things that we do, right? Because I think part of that money being taboo concept is also a lack of trust, right? Because as you say, if we're just 3 generations removed from our true relationship with money, our understanding, our introduction to money, then how do we go from that to then trusting financial institutions? When we saw, for example, in the 70s, we had the collapse of the major bank, I think it was Commerce
Commerce.
Bank back in the day, right? And the impact that will have in terms of breaking that already fragile trust. So at the root of some of this money taboo-ness is coming out of that cultural aspect of it, and that's a very phenomenal point. And actually, I didn't even think about going back that deep in terms of history. So that's a very insightful point, Zara.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Renton.
Terrance.
The history really, I think, does speak so much to us because I think about how much I have learned just from, my parents, my grandparents, the
Mm-hmm.
expectation that, you go to school, you save your money. Some people just don't have that. So unless you have that sort of historical knowledge, and I will say my grandparents probably weren't that great with money. Who knows about them
Mm-hmm.
before them? And then it just becomes a familiar thing. So we do what is familiar, and what is familiar isn't always good for us.
I did an interview on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it reminded me. One of the first questions is, "What's my first knowledge or a memory of money?"
Mm-hmm.
And it really took me back to my grandmother. Right, my
Mm.
grandmother was born in 1926, and she worked on a plantation. And then when the plantation was started expanding, they gave all of them the opportunity to buy land, right? And she didn't buy that land. No, this plantation is where we now have Frigate Bay. No, here I
Mm-hmm.
am in 2023 killing myself to buy land in Frigate Bay. And my grandmother had that access, and she didn't pull the trigger because, I mean, who wants to buy land where they used to work, right? I don't think even the emotional relationship that we have with that area. Then she went into agriculture, right? And I always saw it as, oh, my grandmother sold in the market. But it wasn't until, I was going through like the financial crisis of 2008 that I really pondered. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't just sell in the market. My grandmother was talking to me about money. She had a Sunday school where she would encourage the children in the neighborhood to save, right? And in encouraging them to save, at the end of the year, she would get her interest from the credit union, and then she would calculate it and distribute it across 20, 30 accounts. Well, my grandmother was doing finance. That's a weighted average calculation to determine the distribution. And it wasn't until then I'm like, wow, it was so powerful because my money lessons started with her. So here's the next question. How do we break it? How do we change the narrative that, yes, we might just be 3 generations removed, but how do we change the narrative where we encourage these types of conversations in the household? Gone are the days where, hey, mom and dad, I want to get something. The answer should not be, oh, you think money grow on tree? Oh, me not got none. That can't be the answer. Let's have a real conversation. How do we change that?
A big part of changing that really requires some honesty, because the reasons parents will say, "Oh, money doesn't grow on trees," or "Oh, you think you got it," it's because they don't have it a lot of the times,
In
right?
some cases,
Like
you're right.
in many ways, it feels like a threat to what it is they cannot provide. So a lot of that reaction for some people is just pushback about finances and how they feel about where they are and what they're able to provide. That's a big piece of it. But generally, one of the things that we need to do is be able to talk more about money. A lot of people, and people are very mixed on this, should you, if your
Mm-hmm.
child asks you for something, should you be talking to them about how much money you make? Should there be
Right.
an open discussion in the household about finances? Mommy makes this much money. I mean, there are some people, especially when parents are not living together, mothers are, reliant on
Mm-hmm.
child
Mm-hmm.
maintenance. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
discussion about, oh, well, your father hasn't sent this money, so no, we can't afford this.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
filled
That's
with
a whole lot.
that
That's a
that
whole
but
other
that's
show.
filled with a lot of contempt too, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of resentment built into those money conversations. And that for many people is actually the first time they're really learning about money. Your father hasn't
Mm-hmm.
sent any money, no maintenance is there, you can't do this.
I
Oh,
know.
ask your father for money. So how do we then talk about, so I would encourage people to talk about money a bit holistically. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we can't afford it. This is what the bills are. This is what we're doing. But we have to have like different conversations at different levels. I know some parents are encourage allowances as a way to kind of build a little muscle memory, or like to
Mm-hmm.
build that
Mm-hmm.
muscle about memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your original question is how we do it. Maybe it's listen to Dr. Martin on a Monday morning. Because
Oh,
education is the first key, right?
I
Until we
agree.
start
I
like
agree.
learning about money, only then can we put these things in
Look,
place.
I've approached the last two governments about having a national agenda when it comes to this topic, and yeah, we're just on win right now, right? But we start in the thing, and I'm of the opinion if the government won't do it, I'll find a way to do it myself. But I agree with you completely, completely, completely. One of the first shows I did this past summer when I started this was on the money personality, the
Mm.
whole concept of that and what shapes it and the motivations. And then realizing that even in a household, right? Let's say you have two siblings, you could have one that is present oriented and one that is future oriented, one that believes in the now, one that is willing to save for the tomorrow. And I think part of that too, as we start these conversations, and I agree with you, we need to have a high level view and conversation so parents also get comfortable. I will tell you, I'm 39 and I still don't have these money conversations with my parents. I don't think they actually see me more than as a child, right? I tell my students that all the time. But understanding our money personality could be good, and that's something like fun that we could do in the home, right? We could answer some questions and really share money stories that could be impactful. Hey, Jamster, you want to remind the listening audience of our numbers in case they want to call in and engage the brilliant Ms. Jacobs?
Of course, and actually, this would be a good time to hear from our sponsor, First Federal. But I'll give the numbers first: 466-0989, 662-0989, and 762-0989. And let's get a quick word from First Federal, and we'll come back.
Are you getting a share of the profits from your bank? Kimberly is. Every year, First Federal returns a share of its profits to members like Kimberly. Nice, right? As a credit union, our members are the owners. They own the place. Kimberly reaps rewards every year because she purchased permanent shares and is well on her way to creating wealth. So, what are you waiting for? Be like Kimberly. Get your share of the profits. The more you purchase, the more you earn. At First Federal, we say yes to creating wealth.
And Money Matters continues. It's 10:20. I wanted to add something just quickly, which it's kind of an extension of what Zara was saying. One of the things we have to think about, like I've always looked at, let's say the descendants of the colonizers. You always notice, and you've always noticed. I remember a few years ago, someone came up with a really great illustration of where the descendants of the enslaved enslaved are in terms of their let's say societal evolution. They use the 100-meter race. I don't know if you ever saw that. And so they're
Mhm.
basically saying, well, the colonizers are basically, you could say, 50 meters ahead of us. And so in the context of money, you realize we don't really have much of a investment culture. I mean, we, like you said, we just started talking about money, and even just started parsing what money is and all the different ways money can be leveraged. And to your point, Terrance, I mean, we really have to do a better job of evolving the way we leverage the little money we have.
I like that word
Uh,
leverage, and it's going to be a part of the response to your suggestion. Yeah.
what
Sorry.
suggestion?
You just suggested
Oh,
something that
okay,
we
I
don't
did.
have the
Okay,
investment
yeah,
culture, right?
yeah, yeah.
And the reason why we don't have that investment culture goes back to your concept of leverage. And it's actually the next question I was going to pose to Zara, so we could have this conversation. So you could feel free to chime in, Jabster. The money beliefs that we may have, and the myths that are common in St. Kitts and Nevis that maybe we've noticed, just maybe, interactions with friends, family, or maybe in community or conversations. Are there any money beliefs that we could point to? Because Jamster just described one that maybe cultural that we've noticed that impact financial decisions. And Jamster, you literally just hit the nail on one of the biggest ones that we have that affects the investment culture. You know what it is?
What exactly?
Leverage.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, okay, yeah,
We are
that part,
afraid of
okay,
risk.
yes.
Culturally, we are afraid of risk. We are very risk averse
We
society.
have the stuffed mattress culture, you know.
The stuff
Someone will have
mattress culture, because it
a
really
mattress
goes
might
back
have
to that
more money
element.
than down, actually.
I think that's there was a story some years ago about a lady in Italy who saved all her money in a mattress, and then her children threw it out, right? One time. And it was this big thing that went viral, right? But we have our own myths, and we have this lack of trust, which lead to then risk aversion in the market, meaning our people do not like to take financial risk, in the sense that we hear it, well, I ain't want to owe nobody. Okay. Right. Until we actually then owe people. But then at the same time, Jam saying, you might see where I'm going here. We have an untrust of the system, but yet we trust people blindly, partner hands. Right. So a couple things happening there. Let's go back. Zara, Jamster, are there any money beliefs or myths that you think affects our financial decisions, in your opinion? For me, I think we our imbalanced relationship with risk and trust are some of the big things that affects money beliefs.
I would also include that we have a scarcity mindset. There will never be
Okay.
enough, right? We'll never
Mm-hmm.
be enough. We are in survival mode. But when we leave St. Kitts and we become immigrants, all of a sudden we know how to make money and push. Our
Mm-hmm.
context changes who we are.
Yep.
When we're home, we're very risk averse. We're not working nearly as hard. We're not pushing because we're home. We're relaxed. But
Mm-hmm.
when we migrate, all of a sudden we know how to like hustle and hustle to unknown
Mm-hmm.
strengths, right? We're willing to like make investments and try different things, but it seems that for many of us, it almost takes leaving in order to like make those risks.
I've always wondered
That's
about that. It's a kind of threshold shift in a weird way. That's the only way I could describe
well,
it.
well, you're forced into it, right? So, for example, in Canada, in the US, in Europe, if you work, more than likely your employer has some sort of retirement account which forces you to invest, right? You become an investor. I still think, though, we don't, even the Caribbean nationals in the diaspora here in the US, it's still a small minority of them that actually invest still. I still say, I have these conversations all the time. For example, there's this young woman that went to school with me. She's been in the US for 20 years. She has a retirement account. She saves in it because the company says she has to. She has not changed the allocation. She has not changed the amount that she saves. And every time she sees me, oh, I have to call you for investment advice. Right? There was another national and she never calls, by the way. There was another national who was doing really well, but all her money was sitting in cash in an environment where inflation was 7%, right? And one conversation, I helped her to move money to a different account. So she went from making 0.01% to making over 5%. But yet, she still doesn't want to take that additional risk of being in the market. So it actually follows us. But to Zara's point, we do hustle because of the environment that we're in, right? Here's a question that, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to highlight because when we have immigrants in St. Kitts, we look at them and we say, oh gosh, they're always thirsty for work. They want to do everything, they're undercutting. And when we see them growing, when we see them building, when we see them investing, there's so much resentment. But it's because, as you said, we haven't been taking the risk that actually was available to us right at home.
Yes.
But then the ironic thing is we do the exact same thing when we go.
Exact same thing. But when we're home, things should just come to us. So even though there's a scarcity mindset, there's also an entitlement, right?
Ooh,
it should just arrive to us. It should just arrive to us. We should just get a house. We should just get a car. We should just get a break on whatever it is we want. And it should be there. And when we see other people pushing for it, there's this resentment. And as Johnson says, when we go, we do it. We do what we have to do. But when we're at home, there's something about being home sometimes that just doesn't make us as driven.
I don't know. Maybe I should say we leverage logic more when we go abroad, whereas we don't here. It's weird because you see it all the time.
I think home creates a safety net, right? In the US and Canada and Europe, it's sink or swim. It's literally you sink or you swim.
As it is for immigrants when they come here.
Exactly. So that's a part, I guess, of changing that culture, right? Maybe we should have a scheme where everybody has to go abroad for like 6 months to a year just to experience what life is, right? Or even coming out to the high schools, having things like an adult for a day type of program where we simulate the realities of working, because we don't have a sink or swim environment back home, because if we don't have food, we call the neighbor and somebody can help us, right? If you can't pay a bill or if you don't have internet, somebody can give you a password, because we're still a very giving society, right? And all those, I agree completely. And the entitlement, oh my God, you're speaking to my heartstrings, Zara. I'm loving this, So but let's expand this conversation, right? Do you think that our people in St. Kitts and Nevis, diaspora wider Caribbean, may suffer from maybe, say, financial trauma, right? For example, past financial experiences that influence their decisions today?
Without a doubt, it breaks my heart. There's so many young people that I meet who have taken out loans almost as soon as they came out of school when they get that first job. And when I talk to them about why they took out the loan, it's usually because someone in their family has asked them to take out a loan for them.
Yeah. Yep.
It's almost
they were fresh.
Well, they know that their credit is uninterrupted. They'll be able to get through. So maybe they'll be able to get $10,000. Maybe they'll be able to get $5,000 that person can no longer qualify for. And if they don't do it, it might be your parent, a cousin, your sibling. If you don't do it, oh, you're the worst. Oh, you don't want to see people thrive. That sets people up so far behind. Because when you take out that loan, they don't make enough money to really pay it off in any meaningful way. And they sort of get caught in that. Then they decide, well, I guess I should just borrow more money. And the institution is happy to send them more money. And then you end up just in this thing. So in a very classical psychological way, they're now they're talking about 5. They keep adding them. They talk about different ways people respond to trauma. So some people freeze, and that means they make no decisions. Some people run away, and I don't literally mean running away from the loan, but maybe they are just not opening the bills anymore. When they see a number come up on their phone that they don't know, they're not answering because they know who is calling. Some people fight, so they're going to push through, right? They're going to try and make it and do what they need to do. And some people fawn. And I like to think of that as those are the people who are trying to see if they could get through with anyone else. oh, you could help me out, please? Oh, it would be really good if you could. Oh, yeah, things real hard. I have seen people reach out for money and they say they need $500 for a bill, and I see them work the phones like a telemarketer trying to see
Listen,
who can get them the
listen,
money.
listen, preach. And we're going into the boopsin season. I'm sorry, I had
Well,
to mention.
Ray's all around. I don't know where Ray's come from. You're the finance man. I don't know where men get this extra money to spread around, but
They're saving it. They're saving it for the time and the season.
well, a friend of mine, he told me, it's just a bill item. That's just a budget line for him. You know, he's like, Boops is a budget line, and he knows this is how much he has to spend each month. And if he spends enough, spends it all, that's it for the month. But, that's his line. But these are the responses we have to trauma, right? If you have lived in a home where your family has taken something out on hire purchase and courts had to come back for it. That
We
You
have,
know,
yeah. We have a call.
that's
You guys
that's
want to
part
take
of
the
it.
call?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Money Matters, go right ahead.
Money Matters, talking about investment. What's there to invest in St. Kitts in? Where are the shares to buy in St. Kitts? Who are selling the shares? What return? How soon is the return? Could you just say something about that?
Okay, so I guess that's my question. Thank you for the question, Carla. Look, the investments in St. Kitts, we actually have a lot of options that we don't really know. So let's talk about traditional. And this is kind of a takeaway from the show from today. And we will have, I promise, we're going to have a real show all about investments and different opportunities. Land is still powerful, and the government does have their land scheme coming. And then to leverage also some of the new opportunities that we have from, say, National Bank and FYBC and First Federal, or CIBC, sorry, First Federal Credit Union, our sponsor, in order to go into that a little bit more and having a real estate plan. Now, we may say, well, we don't have enough money to get the loan, but one of the things, and this is also cultural, that stems to our conversation, we tend to be very individualistic when we approach money instead of collaborative, and we don't get into groups. Like, for example, if you want to have an investment, then you start a business. And then if you're going to have a commercial loan, for example, you could approach the bank from the perspective of a commercialized loan. And therefore, then you could have a group effort, right? There's also the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange on the debt market, not on the equity side. The equity side meaning stocks. And we'll get more into these. But even on the equity side, some of the returns could be as much as 13% when we look at the dividends being paid out by companies like St. Lucia Electric and Grenlec and so on. But I promise, Carla, we're going to get more into a conversation about the investment environment. I'm very cautious about real estate in St. Kitts. I think we're in a bubble, and I think that bubble might burst at
We have
some
another caller.
point. Oh, go ahead.
Caller, go right ahead.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Martin.
How are you,
Good morning
Celine?
to Jamston and everybody else. Now, you're talking about the risk aversion.
Mm-hmm.
It's cultural, I remember growing up and my mother talking about there was a bank down by the Red Lion. You ever hear about the Red Lion?
No.
It's either where KFC is or where Nichols.
Okay.
And that bank had failed.
Hmm.
And then with the recent one with the Bank of Commerce,
Mm-hmm.
where people were encouraged to do their savings, small savings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that went on there. So that increased the fear for many people, even some people who were living abroad would send home their money and bank and whatever. Then you get to the impact of politics on the local banks. If you notice, whenever there is a change in government, some opposition parties actually promote a run on the bank.
I've seen some of that.
Are you aware of it?
Yeah, I've seen some of that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even when they were discussing the impact, they were talking about investment. The National Bank invested, I think the ECCB too, invested abroad on the world market and made losses Because
which makes absolutely no sense to me, Carlo. It made absolutely no sense. And I know the losses you're talking about, and it's so frustrating because they have people that they could engage that have information and they ignore us completely. Yes, I'm a bit salty. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. So when you hear that, it's me. Next thing you know, my penny gone. And then sometimes you hear stealing in some of the cooperatives. Mismanagement, right? So that the confidence level is reduced whenever you hear these discussions. So to me, the onus is on the management team and board and so of these institutions to make sure that they're properly managed. Because it makes no sense to have a board that can't manage, a board that is just there to do the government's bidding, all of them. Because that is why we ended up with National Bank and the thing. You give me loans way beyond what any one individual entity should have. You follow?
I follow completely.
Yes, a lot of these things help to make people cautious. So that is why some people, I don't carry money down the next thing, can't get it, or somebody gone with it. But I would encourage people, because sometimes, I remember one time, I usually, when you go back, I buy through National Bank, right? And I would ask them which one of the local shares would be the best buy at this time. And they would tell you. I am still upset over cable and wireless shares that we were encouraged to buy when the government decided to hand over its shares back to cable and wireless. We bought them for 5, and up to now they can't reach back to 5 yet.
Yeah, and unfortunately they won't. Unfortunately, they will not go back to there.
That's what I'm telling you, because I met a lady who said she had about massive 40,000 or something of them,
Yeah.
You can't get no buyers, nobody buying them.
No.
So there's
Even
no
National
market,
Bank
so your money's
shares,
stuck.
There's no liquidity in the market.
You are using the services of cable and wireless with nothing to gain. So that our thing, and then if you would have bought treasury bills, it's the whole thing, We screw up ourselves, eh? You would have bought treasury bills 90 days, now that's 180. When they had the debt restructuring, people lost half of the money. So that there's lack of security in our market.
Yes.
You don't think so?
I agree with you, Carla, and it's right in line with the conversation that we're having with Ms. Jacobs.
Yeah,
and,
psychological. I tell people I don't want no government bonds. Imagine you lose half, and then you got to take 45 years to get the next half. You're dead. So we got to be a little more savvy or whatever, more confidential. So I have gotten. I remember one time, Hotspot gave double shares.
Yeah, so that's called a share split, a stock split. That's called a stock split. Yeah, they basically issued.
National Bank gave double more than once too.
Okay,
a long time ago.
Okay.
So what did they give shares the last time that they're talking about that?
Well, I don't think they gave any additional shares in lieu of their dividends, National Bank last time.
There was some discussion about.
No.
Okay, Ms. Henry, we have another call. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So that helps to explain people's emotional thing. Eh?
Oh yeah, thank you for your input, Carla, and definitely call back when we talk about the investments, because that would be a very deep show. Yeah,
I think we lost that one, but okay.
That's fine. Yeah. Look, that's a powerful thing. What Ms. Henry really talked about here was the trust and fears and some of the things that we're already talking about. And it's really important, though. And Zara, just real quickly, though, because the caller described a lack of trust maybe in financial institutions. But today, we still see the prominence. It's almost like partner hands, right? And you're familiar with partner hands?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, it's almost like banks were failing. So we turn to our friends and family as a conduit to build that trust, right? And to secure money. And people really got into the partner hands. And I know also too, from not having access, we talked about historical underpinnings, not having access to financial institutions, that was probably the way to do it. And we also see it in African culture. So it was brought from Africa. Some countries, they call it susu, etc. But even in a space where we lack trust in financial institutions, why do we trust our friends and neighbors and family? Like, why is there trust in the partner hand?
But do we? How many people know about confusion partner hands?
But you know,
and who didn't do this? Partner hands. There are many that seem to be going just fine, but there are just as many where they say, "Oh, they got the money and they pulled out, and then somebody else had to do this."
Listen.
So people say they don't trust financial institutions, but the line outside National Bank is long all day, every day. People say they don't trust partner hands, and people putting in money. People are trying things, but they'll always have issues. Partner hands, people say they believe in them, but they don't put all their money in partner hands. They look forward to whatever savings come out of it, have the no interest savings, and hope everything will work out. But I don't think they believe in it. I think it's just another way to kind of see your money and force your hand to save.
You know what it is, though.
So
it's
this
the
is a kind of fuzzy
the
logic
money.
at play then.
It is. It's a fuzzy logic because Zara made the point. No interest savings, and it's literally. So what's the worst saving scheme other than a bank in terms of interest? A partner hand. It's literally zero savings, but it's cultural. It's something that has come up,
and it stops it stops you from spending. So that is some
it does.
Thing.
It does.
It is an accountability circle that just allows you to not spend that $200. So some people really need that. They think if I put it in the bank, I'll just draw it out the next day. But if I give it to Jasmine, I know Jasmine will come to my door if I don't pay it.
I like that.
And we're not talking about a specific Jasmine, by the way. So it's just a general reference.
Yeah. But she might be throwing shade for all you know, right?
Not dirty Jasmine. Sorry, Jasmine. All Jasmine.
But just real quickly though, on Facebook recently, there was a story about a lady that said she took her partner hand payout. I guess she's the coordinator, $7,500, and she took it to work. And she says somebody at her job stole it. And although that might be true, and we're not going to get, we're not going to get in whether that's true or not, it really speaks to the vulnerability of such a system, because now all the money is gone. Who replaces that? Who is responsible? What if it's your turn to get that money this month and oops, well, I can't do anything for you, right? So there's a company out of the UK that actually formalized the relationship. They call it Susu still, right? They named it after the name in Africa. And they have sort of brought it into a more systematic structure. So if somebody drops out, the fund steps in, but then every member pays a penalty. It's almost like they built insurance and risk management into the system, right? But let's continue. Look, Zara, you made a good point about the accountability aspect of partner hands, and this is a good segue into this question. Let's talk about relationships. In a relationship, you usually have the accountant and the spender, right? So how does money play a role in family dynamics, marriages, partnerships within our local context? What do you think?
Sorry, I'm trying to be very cautious about my words here. But I think sometimes people enter partnerships. If people could live financially independently, they might not partner with people.
Oh, wow. So coupling allows us to get what we call a joint utility, increase satisfaction, because we're then able to minimize our financial burden, is what you're saying. The benefit
that
of
was the lovely financial language. I will tell you what I said. I remember going to National Bank to see how much I would get for a mortgage. And when they told me how little I would be able to get, I said, so you have any single men who are coming in? Because if so, maybe y'all could set up a dating site and then the single people could join together and do something.
You know, what you're really talking about is powerful, because our incomes really don't support the cost of anything in our society, especially the cost of real estate, where we've seen grown astronomically over the last number of years, right? So it is a big, in the US, they say most marriages fail because of some sort of financial stress. People don't talk about money. the Bible talk, and this might be, I'm sorry, I'm not religious people, I'm not being offensive. The Bible talk about evenly yoked, right? And we usually take it from a religious context, but I actually think it goes beyond that. I think it goes to intellect, it goes to culture. It also goes to financial perspective. If we have very different dynamics in a relationship, you have somebody that loves to spend and somebody that loves to save, that could cause really financial stress on the relationship.
Well,
The person that loves to spend.
if you
Go
have
ahead.
someone who is willing to take risks and someone who is more conservative, that's a lot of
Yes.
pressure on the relationship, right?
Yes.
Because you are
Yes.
saying, no, let us make this move, let us do this. It's going to transform our lives. Or maybe you've
Ooh.
been burned by investments and you've seen your money, your partner's money, or as a unit disappear because they tried to invest in again, apologies, a car rental business, a car
Oh
wash
Lord.
business, whatever the business is. I'm going to, put money into like a nails business, a hair business, and then it doesn't materialize. That is devastating for a relationship because the question
It
is,
is.
how are we now going to pay our bills? How are we going to pay the school fees? What does it mean? Are we a family that takes vacations? Does that mean we can no longer take vacations? All those things really put so many stressors on what most people's relationships are already tenuous at best.
But this is a question to the two of you now. How do you engineer a middle ground that makes that relationship a little more
So
um
so when I used to
agreeable,
practice,
maybe?
Jams, and I was a wealth manager. I had my firm. I still do it, but on a more concierge type scale. It's really hard to what I observed. There are two types of relationships. There are those that want to work together, and then those that do their finances separately still. And in minority households, chances are, Black households like we have, we still treat money separately. So even though we come together to afford that mortgage or to get into that relationship in terms of that, we still view money very differently. And usually it goes something like this. I remember I overheard a conversation once with someone telling their husband, "Oh, don't spend your paycheck until I come back," right? That kind of context. What mine is mine, what's yours is mine, right? That kind of context as well. And we see some of those in marriages, that kind of dynamic there as well. So if you're talking to couples, we have to talk to couples. You can't just talk to the husband or the man. You have to also include the woman in the conversation. And there are usually ways. If to Zara's point on risk, if somebody is very aggressive and like to take risk, and then the other partner is not, then the part of it is educating the partner that is not, and educating the partner that loves risk taking to come down. Because sometimes the one that loves risk taking is too aggressive, and then the other one is too conservative. And finding education and using examples and storytelling to find that happy medium. I think that helped me when I was doing that type of practice.
Yes, so you definitely have to do, and it takes time for people. It's not just one conversation, but sometimes even in couples, people don't like to actually look at the real numbers. If you ever talk to
Yes.
people, do they actually want to write down how much they make, what all their expenses, those things?
Mm-hmm.
People don't like it makes them so uncomfortable.
You
Even
know,
with someone who they share a bed with, even with someone
mm-hmm.
who they share children with, those numbers, because many of us are so avoidant.
We have shame surrounding debt or how much debt you have. But I tell people all the time, there's no rich person in this world that does not have debt. There's literally no wealthy person that does not have debt, but we've been engineered or told or trained to believe that debt is so bad. It's not that debt is bad, it's the use of debt is bad. If you find debt for something that is productive, then it could be very helpful, especially if it's going to help you to make money while you sleep, right? There's never been somebody that worked 2 or 3 jobs and got rich, right? But usually the person that is indebted, but productively so, they're the ones that grow wealth over time,
Which is
right?
hard to believe, right? It just doesn't make sense for
It doesn't make logic
how
sense,
we
yes.
see money. Because when people look
Yeah.
at people who they perceive as rich, we would never think that they're in debt. Oh, they must own that car. Oh, they must own all those houses. Oh, they own all of that business, and they don't understand that they have invested in ways so that these things are
Exactly.
possible. So again, education. Listen to Money Matters on Mondays.
I love the plug. Because the ways in which we grow wealth, right? We either do so through equity, as in we buy ownership into something with cash on hand, or we debt finance, right? And the rule of thumb is, if a company goes and raises money through equity after they're public, like a national bank is a publicly traded bank, and they come back to the general public and they try to raise money, right? Bank of Nevis did this a few years ago, but they were capitalizing their bank where they were selling additional shares. The perception usually is when you go for equity that you can't raise money because your debt profile is not well managed. You're too leveraged. So the stock market shows favor to a company that does debt financing because it shows you can manage your debt. All right, but that's another conversation. We're going to talk about that. But okay, let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about some strategies and some practices that our listeners can adopt to foster positive emotional relationships with money. We don't want nobody getting divorced over money, right? So what are some strategies and practices that we can adopt, our listeners can adopt for a positive relationship with money?
Well, I'm sure you have the handbook on this and you can just share. But one of the things I do like to talk to people about when they are comfortable talking about money is stress the importance of introspection and honesty. You have to do a look within. As I said, get down to those figures. Write them down. A lot of people, when we do budgets and they show them, they're like, well, it doesn't even make sense. How do I eat? But things you should be separating your wants, your needs, and then what's actually enjoyable to you. Because sometimes some of the wants that we are spending on, we're not even feeling good about them. So we have to think about, is this how I want to spend my money? When am I more likely to spend? When am I more likely to save? Is there an accountability person that I can build in so that I can make different money decisions? Sorry to plug your show again, but Money Matters on Mondays. Like, what are those things that I could make concrete steps for so that I can do things differently with my money? Maybe this is a plug, but sometimes you might need to talk to someone about what's going on. Our shame around money, our shame about not being able to live the lives that we want, actually puts us, many of us, more in debt. Or it makes us withdraw. I don't want to see my friends anymore because I'm not doing as well as I thought I would do. I'm not really talking to my family because it's causing a problem. Like, all these things sort of put us in a spell where we stress about money, then we make poor financial decisions, then we stress again. We're in this constant loop and cycle, and we need a way out. So finding a trusted person who is educated on money. And I will also say, as much as this is about Money Matters, we live in a very capitalistic society that only values money, what we can produce, and that hustle culture is also grinding many of us all the way down.
Oh yeah.
So think about, what is the life I actually want to live, and am I making decisions to move towards that?
Sometimes we're working so hard and we don't know what goal we're working towards, right? To your point. And that's brilliant. Look, what can I add to that? What can I add to that brilliance, Jamster? This definitely tells me.
Well, the only thing I would say, but what I would say is to both of you, to the point about us not being very. I have to come back to logic again. I find a lot of magical think. Even I do it sometimes. A lot of magical thinking goes on. Take for example, you go to the bank for a loan, right? And they're asking you, your bills and so on. And then sometimes I realize, but wait, I didn't put any money for food, or I didn't put. It's so it's like magical thinking, and sometimes their whole cohorts of your monthly expenses that get left out. And when you think about it, as a whole, you realize, hey, well, that doesn't make any sense. I didn't include money for gas or for
or
stuff
car
like that.
Maintenance.
Yeah, exactly.
Things that just pop up.
Exactly.
Emergencies, yeah. No, you see, to the point, we're then sensitized, even though we're told debt is bad, we go into debt, then we're told you have to pay your debts, don't owe nobody, right? And then there's a way in which to approach repayment of debt, and that's something we could talk about in the next show. You always have to pay
highest
those that
interest
would allow you
first?
to be. Well, that's a debate. Do we go high interest or do we go small balance, right? And we'll talk about that, because psychologically small balance could actually lead to more positive outcomes than just paying high interest. Even the high interest lead to more financial strain long term. But the point I was trying to make here was that it really comes back into education. It really goes back to education. And as I don't know if you know, there was a study done recently on financial literacy in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, and it was abysmal. The results were terrible. In fact, Anguilla was rated as the most financially literate country, and it's only about 70% of the population of the sample that they surveyed, and St. Vincent was the worst, right? And St. Kitts and Nevis somewhere is in the middle. And yet, Financial Information Month just passed in October, and I bet you to tell me one event that we had for Financial Information Month in St. Kitts.
Well, I know they were in the square doing an event, so
Okay. Okay, good. I just didn't hear about any. Anyway, so
It would be nice if we could find out if there's been any evolution or any improvement in financial I guess.
Listen, Jamster, listen. Listen. Look, here's my last question to you, Zara, and then I'll wrap up. We only have a few minutes. So real quickly, any final thoughts that you may have, and maybe even if you could talk about how maybe some of these financial stresses that we may have could even trigger larger mental health issues.
So there are so many mental health issues that can be easily related to managing money and finance. So depression is a big one, right? Some people just can't face what it is. It lowers their mood, their inability to participate in life. For other people, anxiety is another huge one. If you already worry about things and money is on the table, that's all you can think about. And again, mental health issues, when they impact your life, it means it impacts all aspects, and all of a sudden you aren't able to make the decisions that you need. To think about money, you have to have your whole self there. And if you can't have your whole self there to make those logical decisions Jamster was talking about, to remove that magical thinking, you might need some help to get around that. Find someone you trust that you can talk to kind of work on those numbers. If the mental health issue is actually more than you can manage on your own, you might need some professional help for that as well. But don't let those feelings of shame and guilt around money stop you from making better decisions. Sometimes we just need help to get there.
Look, that's an amazing way to wrap up the show. We had an hour, but in this short hour, we talked about so much, right? We talked about the emotional connection to money. We talked about cultural money beliefs. We talked about financial trauma and the past experiences that shape our current money behaviors. We talked about money and relationships and how financial stress and mental health intertwined, right? And then how we could build positive, healthy money mindsets. That's an incredible hour, I think, Zara. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and participating. I want to thank our callers. And I think this is just the first step. This is part one, a broad surface, and then we could dig even deeper, right? We could have more fundamental conversations. I hope it was enjoyable for you as well. And we're happy that you're here. Was it enjoyable, Ms. Jacobs?
Sorry, I wasn't sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Martin and Jamster. You're a wonderful conduit. Wonderful.
Look, it takes financial knowledge to know that you're making financial mistakes. I'm Dr. Terrance Martin, and I think next week's show, I'm debating whether or not we're going to go with a topic like retirement, or should we consider going to a next step? What do you think, Ms. Jacobs? Help me decide on the topic for next week. Should we talk about gender differences when it comes to money management, especially as we're approaching the Christmas season and the relationships conversation we just had? Or should we go talk about retirement planning and what are some of the important topics there as it relates to
let's get Zara's input.
Let's get Zara's input on that. What topic should I pick for next week?
Spending for Christmas, because all the sales are on right now for tiles and paint and everything. And sometimes you have to wonder, do you actually need new paint, tiles, and everything this year? So yes, spending decisions. Okay. Christmas is coming.
Point.
Spending for Christmas. What date is it? So that would be the 13th We could do okay. We could spend them for Christmas showing before the 20th. Yeah, either next week or the week after.
Okay, guys.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We're done. Jamsa, I know you're running me, but
Yeah.
once again, this is Money Matters. It takes financial knowledge to know you're making financial mistake. Thank you to my guest, Sarah Jacobs. Bye,
Okay,
Jamsa.
Zara, it was real.
Thank you.
Okay. Terrance, see you next week.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. Yeah.
All right. Have a
Okay.
good show. Bye.
Are you getting a share of the profits from your bank? Kimberly is. Every year, First Federal